The champagne flute was cold against my fingers, so cold it almost burned, and I watched condensation trail down the crystal like tears I refused to cry. My mother's laugh cut through the string quartet playing Vivaldi. That specific laugh. The one she saved for humiliating me in front of her country club friends. I knew what was coming before I even turned around. "Madison, darling," she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness that made my stomach clench. "Come here and say hello to the Vanderbilts." I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to walk straight out of this suffocating ballroom with its glittering chandeliers and people who measured your worth by the zeros in your bank account. But I'd promised myself I wouldn't run anymore. Not tonight. I turned slowly, deliberately, my silver dress catching the light. My father stood beside my mother, his expression already twisted into that familiar look of disappointment, like I was a stain on his perfectly pressed tuxedo. Between them stood my sister Victoria, radiant in emerald green, her arm looped through her fiancé's, some hedge fund manager whose name I could never remember because he had the personality of dry toast. "There she is," my father said, and something venomous leaked into his tone. "Our little charity case." The Vanderbilts shifted uncomfortably. Even by my parents' standards, that was cruel. "Richard," Mrs. Vanderbilt murmured, but my mother was already talking, her eyes scanning the crowd behind me with theatrical concern. "Madison, sweetie, where is your date? You did bring someone, didn't you?" She touched her pearl necklace, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. It meant she was about to strike. "Or are you here alone again?" Victoria smirked. That same smirk she'd perfected at 14 when she realized our parents loved her more. When she learned that being prettier, smarter, more obedient meant she could do no wrong while I could do no right. "She probably made someone up," Victoria said, examining her manicured nails. "Remember when she was 16 and invented that boyfriend from boarding school? What was his name?" "Josh." "Jason," I said quietly, my jaw tight. "And he was real." "Sure he was," my mother said, patting my arm like I was a confused child. "It's okay, darling. Not everyone is meant to find love young like Victoria. Some people just take longer to blossom." The air felt thick, pressing down on my chest. The scent of expensive perfume and white roses made me dizzy. I could feel eyes turning toward us, whispers starting to ripple through the crowd. My parents never cared about making a scene as long as they came out looking like the long-suffering heroes dealing with their disappointing daughter. "Actually," my father said, and his voice grew louder, carrying across the marble floor. "Look at this. Look who she came with." He gestured at the empty space beside me, his face twisting into mock sympathy that made my blood boil. "Absolutely no one. While Victoria has secured herself a future with the Carmichael family, Madison can't even find someone willing to be seen with her." Something inside me cracked. Not broke, just cracked, letting all the rage I'd stored for 26 years start seeping through. "You know what's funny?" I said, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "You've spent my entire life comparing me to Victoria. My grades weren't good enough. My career choice wasn't prestigious enough. My apartment wasn't in the right neighborhood. Nothing I ever did was enough for you." "Madison," my mother hissed, her smile frozen in place. "Not here." "Why not here?" I met her eyes, those cold blue eyes that had looked at me with disappointment since the day I was born second. "You're perfectly happy to humiliate me here. To parade me around like evidence of your failure as parents." My father's face turned purple. "How dare you speak to your mother that way? After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful." "There you are." The voice came from behind me, low and smooth, carrying an authority that made everyone within earshot fall silent. I felt the warmth of someone's presence before I felt the touch, an arm sliding around my waist with confident familiarity, pulling me back against a solid chest. My breath caught. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart," the voice murmured near my ear, sending shivers down my spine. Traffic was murder. I started to turn, confused, my heart hammering, but then lips brushed against my temple, soft and deliberate, before moving to capture my mouth in a kiss that made the entire ballroom disappear. When we broke apart, I was dizzy for entirely different reasons. I looked up into eyes I recognized from magazine covers, from news broadcasts, from the business section my father read every morning with his coffee. My mother made a sound like she was choking. My father's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. "Oh my God," my mother whispered, her face draining of all color. "It's Alexander Thorne. The Alexander Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries, youngest self-made billionaire in the country. The man my father had spent 15 years trying to schedule a meeting with and getting nowhere. The man whose empire made my family's old money look like pocket change. And he was standing in this ballroom with his arm around my waist like he belonged there. "Alexander," my father stammered, his voice cracking on the second syllable. He bent down, frantically trying to pick up the shards of broken glass with his bare hands. A waiter rushed over, but my father waved him away. His face flushed crimson with embarrassment and something else. Desperation, maybe. "Mr. Thorne, I didn't realize you would be. We weren't aware that you and Madison were. That she had. I apologize for the mess You were just publicly humiliating your daughter," Alexander said calmly, but his voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. His hand remained on my waist, steady and warm, anchoring me when I wanted to float away from the unreality of this moment. I heard every word from across the room. The silence that followed was suffocating. The string quartet had stopped playing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every person in that ballroom was watching us now, and for once in my life, I wasn't the one drowning in shame. My mother recovered first, her PR smile snapping into place like a mask. "There's been a misunderstanding. We were just having a family discussion, nothing serious. You know how families can be, all in good fun." She reached for my arm. "Madison knows we love her." I pulled away from her touch. "Do I?" Her smile faltered. Victoria stepped forward, her emerald dress catching the light as she positioned herself between us and our parents. Always the peacemaker when it benefited her image. "Madison's always been sensitive. She takes things the wrong way." She turned to Alexander, and I watched her shift into full charm mode, the one that had won her homecoming queen valedictorian, every scholarship she'd ever applied for. "Mr. Thorne, it's such an honor to meet you. I'm Victoria Ashford, Madison's older sister. I followed your work with renewable energy infrastructure. Absolutely fascinating." She extended her hand, and the diamond on her ring finger caught the chandelier light, throwing rainbows across the marble floor. Alexander looked at her hand like it was a dead fish. "I know who you are," he said, his voice flat and cold in a way that made Victoria's smile crack at the edges. "Madison's mentioned you." The implication in those 4 words hung in the air like poison gas. What exactly had I mentioned? Victoria's eyes darted to me, and I saw something flicker there. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere private," my father said, attempting to regain control. He straightened his tie, trying to look authoritative despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "Alexander, I've been meaning to reach out about a potential partnership between our companies. Maybe we could schedule lunch this week. I'm sure we have much to discuss." The audacity made me want to laugh. 5 minutes ago he'd called me a charity case. Now he was trying to use me as a networking opportunity. Alexander's jaw tightened. "I don't do business with men who treat their daughters like disappointments." He looked at my mother, then Victoria, his gaze settling on each of them with the kind of assessment that probably terrified people in boardrooms. Or families who build one child up by tearing the other down. Mrs. Vanderbilt made a small noise of approval. Around us, I could hear whispers growing louder, phones being pulled from designer clutches. By tomorrow morning this would be all over social media. My family's dirty laundry aired in front of everyone who mattered in their shallow, glittering world. "You don't understand our family dynamics," my mother said, her voice shaking now, the composure cracking. "Madison has always been difficult. She dropped out of law school. She works at some little bookstore instead of using her degree. She refuses every opportunity we give her. Because your opportunities came with conditions, I said, and my voice didn't shake anymore. Alexander's presence beside me felt like armor, like permission to finally speak every truth I'd swallowed for years. Go to law school, but only if I studied corporate law. Get a job, but only at firms you approved of. Date someone, but only if they came from the right families with the right connections. Everything was about controlling me, shaping me into another version of Victoria. That's not fair, Victoria said, but her voice was small. Isn't it? I turned to face her fully. Tell me, Vicky, when was the last time Mom and Dad showed up to anything I did? My college graduation. My art show last spring. My birthday dinner 3 months ago. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The answer was never, and we both knew it. Madison. My father tried again, his tone shifting to the one he used during negotiations. Reasonable. Measured. Vic. You're being emotional. Let's table this discussion and enjoy the gala. Alexander, I hope you won't judge our entire family based on one misunderstanding. 1. Alexander's laugh was cold and sharp. I've been watching your family for 20 minutes. I've seen how you look at Madison. How you position Victoria in every conversation. How you weaponize love like it's something she has to earn. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter but somehow more dangerous. My mother was just like you. She made me feel worthless every day until I was old enough to leave and never look back. I know exactly what you are. The words hit my parents like physical blows. My mother actually stepped backward, her hand flying to her throat. How dare you, she whispered. How dare I? Alexander's arm tightened around my waist. How dare you? She's your daughter, and you treat her like a burden instead of a gift. The ballroom felt like it was tilting. My vision blurred at the edges, and I realized I was crying, hot tears sliding down my cheeks that I couldn't stop. But they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were something else. Relief, maybe. Or release. Someone started clapping. It was Mrs. Vanderbilt, her weathered hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. Then her husband joined her. Then another couple. Then another. Within seconds, half the ballroom was clapping, and my parents stood in the center of it like defendants at trial, their faces masks of humiliation and rage. We're leaving, my father announced, grabbing my mother's arm. Victoria, come. But Victoria didn't move. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something almost like regret. Vicky, my mother said sharply. Now. My sister's eyes met mine for a long moment, and I saw her lips form 2 words. I'm sorry. Then she turned and followed our parents through the crowd, her emerald dress trailing behind her like a flag of surrender. The clapping faded. The quartet started playing again. Conversations resumed. But everyone kept glancing our way, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. Are you okay? Alexander asked quietly, his hand moving to my shoulder, surprisingly gentle. I looked up at him, this stranger who had just demolished my family in front of half of high society, and realized I had no idea what was happening. Why? I whispered. Why did you do that? You don't even know me. His expression shifted, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Don't I? Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. What is it? Yes. He showed me the phone. It was a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words that made my blood run cold. She knows everything. And attached below it was a photograph of me from 6 months ago, standing outside a building I'd hoped never to see again, talking to someone whose face had been circled in red. My ex-husband. The air left my lungs in a rush. Alexander's hand on my shoulder tightened, steadying me before I could sway. Breathe, Madison. Just breathe. But I couldn't. Because that photograph shouldn't exist. That conversation had happened in the dead of night, In a part of town I'd driven 2 hours to reach specifically because no one I knew would ever see me there. I'd been so careful. So desperately careful. "We need to leave," Alexander said, his voice low and urgent. He was already guiding me toward the exit, his body positioned between me and the curious stares that followed us like searchlights. "Now!" My heels clicked against the marble floor, the sound echoing in my skull like gunshots. The photograph burned behind my eyes. 6 months ago. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago, which meant that picture was taken when I was still trying to negotiate the settlement, still trying to get Marcus to sign the papers without destroying me completely. The night air hit my face like a slap when we stepped outside. Cold. Dark. Real. Alexander's car was already there. A sleek black vehicle that probably cost more than my yearly salary, with a driver who opened the door without being asked. "Get in," Alexander said. "I don't understand what's happening." My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "How do you have that photo? Who sent it? And why did you even come tonight? You said I mentioned Victoria, but I've never met you before in my life." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his expression made my heart stutter. "Haven't you?" he asked quietly. The memory hit me like lightning. 3 years ago. Coffee shop near the bookstore where I worked. I'd been crying, mascara running down my face because Marcus had just told me I was worthless, that no one would ever want me, that I should be grateful he'd married me at all. A man had sat down across from me without asking, slid a napkin across the table, and said 5 words that had stayed with me ever since. "He's wrong about you." "Oh my God," I whispered. "The coffee shop. You were the man in the coffee shop." Alexander nodded slowly. "You told me everything that day. About your husband. About your family. About feeling trapped between 2 different kinds of prison." He paused. "You probably don't remember, but you also told me your name and where you worked. I've been keeping tabs on you ever since." The word should have terrified me. Keeping tabs. That was stalker language, obsessive language. But the way he said it didn't feel threatening. Felt protective. "Why?" I asked. "Because I saw myself in you," he said simply. "And because 3 years ago I made you a promise. You probably don't remember that either. You were pretty drunk by the end of our conversation." I did remember, actually. Fragments of it. His voice, calm and steady, telling me I deserved better. Telling me that someday, somehow, the people who hurt me would regret it. "You said you'd help me make them pay," I whispered. "And here we are." He gestured to the phone still clutched in my hand. "That text wasn't from an enemy, Madison. It was from my head of security. Your ex-husband has been shopping that photo around to various tabloids, trying to sell a story about how you were cheating on him, how the divorce was your fault. He's broke, desperate, and willing to destroy your reputation for a quick payout." The pieces started falling into place, sharp and cutting. "You knew," I said slowly. "You knew he was going to do this. You knew my parents would be at the gala tonight. You planned all of this. I gave you a choice." Alexander's voice was steady. 2 weeks ago, I had someone leave an invitation to this gala at the bookstore where you work, along with a note that said if you wanted revenge, if you wanted to finally make your family see what they'd lost, to wear the silver dress and I'd take care of the rest. I remembered the invitation. The beautiful cream cardstock that had appeared on the counter during my shift, tucked inside a silver envelope with no return address. I'd thought it was a mistake at first. Then I'd seen the note, written in elegant handwriting. "They've hurt you long enough. Let me help. Wear silver." I'd almost thrown it away. Almost convinced myself it was a prank or something worse. But then I'd thought about my parents, about Victoria, about every condescending smile and disappointed sigh and comparison that had carved pieces out of my soul. So I'd worn the silver dress. "You used me," I said, "but there was no heat in it. Just exhaustion." "No." Alexander stepped closer, his eyes intense in the streetlight. "I gave you a weapon. What you did with it was entirely your choice. You could have stayed home tonight. You could have worn a different color. You could have walked away the second I touched you. His voice softened. But you didn't. Because part of you wanted this. Wanted them to hurt the way they've hurt you. He was right. God help me, he was right. What about the photo? Yes. What about Marcus? Alexander smiled, and it wasn't kind. By morning, 3 different news outlets will run stories about Marcus Reeves, failed entrepreneur who embezzled from his own company and is currently under investigation for fraud. The photo he's trying to sell. It'll be exposed as being from a time period when you were already separated, meeting to finalize divorce paperwork. He'll be laughed out of every editorial office in the city. How? Because I've been building a case against him for 6 months, Alexander said. Ever since my security team flagged him trying to sell stories about you. Everything I needed was already there. I just had to organize it. My knees felt weak. I leaned against the car, the cold metal grounding me. This is insane. You're insane. I'm insane for getting in a car with you. Probably, he agreed. But are you sorry? I thought about my mother's face when she'd seen Alexander. My father's desperate scrambling. The way Victoria's apology had sounded genuine for the first time in years. The applause that had followed my parents' humiliation. No, I said. I'm not sorry. Good. He opened the car door wider. Now get in. We have one more stop to make tonight. Where? Your parents' house. My stomach dropped. Why? Because your sister has been texting me for the last 10 minutes. He showed me his phone. The messages were frantic, desperate. Victoria, please tell Madison to call me. Victoria, I need to talk to her. Alone. Victoria. Mom and Dad just told me something I didn't know. About her trust fund. Victoria, she deserves to know the truth. What truth? Yes. I don't know, Alexander admitted. But whatever it is, Victoria seems to think it matters. I looked at the phone, at the messages, at this impossible night that kept spiraling into stranger territory. Every instinct told me to go home, to process everything that had happened, to build my walls back up before I got hurt again. But I'd spent 26 years listening to those instincts. And where had it gotten me? Okay, I said. Let's go. The drive to my parents' estate took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of silence broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional buzz of Alexander's phone as more messages came through. I watched the familiar streets pass by, the neighborhood growing progressively wealthier until we turned onto the tree-lined drive that led to the house I'd grown up in. The house that had never felt like home. Victoria was waiting on the front steps, still in her emerald dress, but she'd kicked off her heels. Her fiancé was nowhere to be seen. She stood when the car pulled up, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. You came, she said when I stepped out. Her voice was hoarse like she'd been crying. You have 5 minutes, I said. Then I'm leaving. She nodded, accepting the boundary. Mom and Dad aren't here. They went to stay at the club for the night. Too embarrassed to face the staff. A bitter laugh escaped her. They're already talking about damage control, about how to spin tonight's disaster. Victoria, what is this about? My sister took a deep breath. Your trust fund. The one Grandma Helen left you when she died. You were supposed to get it when you turned 25, remember? I remembered. I'd turned 25 last year, and when I'd asked about the money, my father had told me there were complications with the estate, that it would take time to sort out. He'd promised it would be handled soon. That had been 14 months ago. What about it? Yes. There is no trust fund anymore, Victoria said quietly. Dad embezzled it. 5 years ago when his company was failing. He took your entire inheritance, almost $2 million, and used it to cover his debts. The world tilted. That's not possible, I whispered. That money was in my name. It was protected. He forged your signature, Victoria continued, and tears were sliding down her face now. Mom knew. They both knew. And they've been lying to you for years, stalling, hoping you'd just forget about it or that they'd somehow make the money back before you demanded an accounting. Alexander's hand found mine. his fingers threading through my own. "How do you know this?" I asked. "Because tonight after you left, I confronted them." Victoria's voice broke. "I asked them why they treated you so differently. Why nothing you did was ever good enough. And Dad got drunk and angry and told me everything. He said you'd always been the difficult one, the one who questioned everything, and when he needed money, it was easy to justify taking it. He said you owed the family for all the opportunities you'd wasted." Rage, white-hot and pure, flooded through me. "He stole from me," I said, "and then made me feel guilty for not being grateful enough." "I'm so sorry," Victoria whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything. For going along with it, for not questioning why they compared us constantly, for taking their side because it was easier than standing up to them. You deserved better. You deserved better from all of us." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw past the perfect exterior to the guilt and regret underneath. She'd been a victim too, in a different way. Trapped in the role of golden child, forced to maintain an impossible standard while watching her sister suffer. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I turned to Alexander. "Can you prove it? The embezzlement. If there's proof to be found, my team will find it," he said. "It'll take a few days, maybe a week. But if your father forged documents, if he moved that money illegally, we'll have him. And then," Alexander's smile was sharp, "then you press charges. You take him to court. You destroy his reputation the way he tried to destroy yours." He paused. "Or you offer him a deal. Full restitution plus interest in exchange for staying out of prison. Either way, you win." The choice sat in front of me, heavy and powerful. Prison would satisfy the rage. But restitution would give me freedom. "I want my money back," I said finally. "Every penny, plus interest, plus a written confession that I can release if they ever try to hurt me again." I looked at Victoria. "And I want them to apologize to you too. For using you as a weapon against me." Victoria's eyes widened. "Madison, I don't need." "Yes, you do," I said firmly. "We both deserve better than what they gave us." My sister nodded, fresh tears spilling over. Alexander pulled out his phone, already typing. "I'll have my lawyers draft the paperwork tonight. By morning, your parents will have a choice. Cooperate or face criminal prosecution." "They'll cooperate," Victoria said quietly. "They care more about their reputation than anything else." I believed her. We stood there in silence for a moment, three people connected by pain and blood and the wreckage of a family that had never known how to love right. "What happens now?" I asked. Alexander looked at me, and something warm flickered in his eyes. "Now you decide what you want your life to look like. No more parents controlling you. No more ex-husband haunting you. Just you with $2 million and complete freedom." The possibility stretched out before me, vast and terrifying and beautiful. I think," I said slowly, "I'd like to expand my bookstore. Maybe turn it into something bigger. Community space. Somewhere people feel safe." "I think that sounds perfect," Alexander said. Victoria stepped forward hesitantly. "Could we maybe get coffee sometime? Start over. I like to get to know my sister. The real one, not the version Mom and Dad created." I considered it. The hurt was still there. Years of accumulated wounds that wouldn't heal overnight. But I could see her trying, genuinely trying, and that meant something. "One coffee," I said. "We'll see where it goes from there." She smiled, shaky but real. "Thank you." As Alexander and I drove away, I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. The house that had held so much pain. Tomorrow, my parents would wake up to legal documents and consequences. Tomorrow, my ex-husband would find his schemes exposed. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight I was free. "Thank you," I said to Alexander. "For everything. For remembering me. For coming tonight." "Thank me by living well," he said. "That's the best revenge there is." He was right. 6 months later, I stood in my expanded bookstore, watching people fill the new community space we'd built. Reading groups and writing workshops and art classes. The trust fund money, fully restored with interest, had made it possible. My parents had signed the papers without a fight, their confession locked in a safe deposit box as insurance. Victoria came to the grand opening without her fiancé. She'd broken off the engagement 3 weeks after the gala, finally admitting she'd only said yes because our parents expected it. We weren't close yet, but we were learning. My parents hadn't spoken to me since signing the paperwork. I considered that a blessing. And Alexander. He'd become a friend, a real one. Someone who understood the particular pain of family betrayal and the sweet relief of choosing yourself instead. "You did it," he said, appearing beside me with 2 cups of coffee. "You built something beautiful." I took the coffee, warmth spreading through my hands. "We did it," I corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," he said. "Eventually." I just sped up the timeline. Maybe he was right. Maybe I would have found my way here eventually. But I was grateful I hadn't had to do it alone. Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady, washing the streets clean. And for the first time in my life I felt like I could breathe.